What is up, fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with another NBA Team Look Ahead podcast. We are on to the Denver Nuggets, which means I had to bring back Adam Mares, the VP of Creative Production over at DNVR Sports. Follow him on Twitter at Adam_Mares. That's at ADAM_MARES. Also, be sure to go follow DNVR. They just do a great job covering all Denver sports, of course, the Nuggets, at DNVR_sports. He's also the co-host of the Locked On Nuggets podcast, another great podcast. Just does a whole lot and does it super well and fantastically. And I love picking his brain about the Nuggets. And he's basically here to talk me off a ledge, hopefully. But my first question to Adam is the most important question. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Talk you off the ledge. This is going to be a tough challenge for me, I think, today.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to just start with like any general thoughts or themes you had on the offseason, but I find myself being glued to just what's happened in the preseason. And not a huge sample size, but the defense is concerning me. But let me start with the offseason. Like, what were your thoughts on how they handled it? Any general sentiments, themes that you're focusing on heading into the regular season?
Well, the theme would be like continuity or lack thereof. I mean, in the Jokic era, the team has not made big changes in the offseason. They've been like marginal every year. 1, 2, maybe 3 guys, mostly on the periphery, are like shuffled in and out. But this is a year where I've given people this stat, and it's kind of mind blowing. The last time Jamal Murray played, there was only 4 current Nuggets in the rotation: Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon. All the other players, basically the next 6 of the top 10 guys are all new pieces from the last time he played. So a lot of that happened this offseason. You lose Tim Conley and you replace him with Calvin Booth. I know that doesn't have an on-court impact, but it is a little bit of a it feels like a different team. And then you make all of the big moves with Monte Morris and Will Barton and everything else. So to me, the theme of this year is obviously regrouping, coming back with Jamal Murray, Michael Porter, title or bust, all of those things. But the secondary thing is that there's not a lot of continuity this year from previous seasons.
I was a big fan of some of the moves they made, like Bruce Brown specifically, being able to get KCP. I thought that was kind of like a both sides did well trade. But Jamal Murray, there's just really not a lot of sample size to work with, but knowing what's happened in practice, the stuff coming out of training camp, what have been your impressions of his return, and should we expect any ramp up or maintenance program for him this season?
So I think he looks really healthy. One of the things you're wondering about is, do they run? Do they jump? Are they going to the hole? Are they trying to avoid contact? And Jamal Murray hasn't looked like that at all. He's looked healthy. There's no limp or anything like that, or favors one side. So to me, when you watch him, he doesn't look injured in any way. I do think he looks preseason form, not midseason form. And I don't know how much of this is just coming back from the injury and how much of this is typical Jamal. I know you follow the team close enough to know Jamal Murray usually gets off to slow starts and then finishes the season strong and then is great in the playoffs. Maybe it's just that, but I would say he looks perfectly healthy. He just doesn't look like he is in tip-top speed and shape.
And that's just like knowing what we know about him too, and his work ethic off the court. He's also young. That's just, I can't bring myself to worry about him at all long term. Michael Porter Jr., on the other hand, I find myself a little bit more worried about. The back stuff could be chronic, but then also sometimes he looks like the perfect fit that could basically help the Nuggets transcend all these other contenders. And then other times he just looks out of place or unwilling or just, I don't know, weird. What are you looking to see from him this season, aside from hopefully better availability?
So, I mean, again, we'll have to start with the health part of this. I think he looks healthy. There's nothing he's doing or not doing that remind you of an injury or that he's coming off of an injury. So that's the first thing. He attacks the basket, he takes falls and gets right up. Like, he looks perfectly fine to me. But what's funny about Michael Porter, the skill set is very loud and very obvious. He's a great shooter and he's a pretty good scorer, even though he's not like the most dynamic scorer, has a great handle or this or that, but he just scores. He's a natural scorer. The question for Michael Porter has always been, can he mesh with Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic? Can he figure out a way to – can he sort of accept a role, and can the team find a role that takes advantage of all of his skills in a way that blends perfectly with the other guys? And what's hard about this preseason, and I imagine part of why you've been a little bit gun shy, or what was the word you used? You're in a panic or something about him. You're on the ledge.
Yeah, basically, I'm on the ledge about this entire team right now. More so, I went on DMVR, one of your podcasts, and I said, I'm right now, this might have been August, whatever it was, the Nuggets would be my title pick. And now I'm like, maybe I need to consider my options here.
You need to hedge it. I think the thing is that they've only played one half together in this preseason. Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, Michael Porter, they've only been on the court together for like 12 minutes total. And, so we're looking at a really small sample size, and we knew that was going to take a lot of time to get together. And the defensive part, whatever, let's put that to the side. I know we're going to talk about that later on. To me, if you buy the Nuggets, you buy that those three guys create this offensive lineup that's unsolvable. And it's unsolvable in terms of talent. It's unsolvable in terms of all the guys that can score and the different ways they can score. But Michael Porter is just a guy that is still trying to develop chemistry with Jokic, with Murray. And even in that first half, there was a little bit of a sense of your turn, my turn. Like, where do I fit into this? Is this a shot in the rhythm? And that, to me, is the number one thing I'm looking at with Michael Porter. Can the Nuggets get the most out of him because he starts to blend chemistry-wise with the rest of the guys?
I had it later, but this sort of ties into that. Is a way to help alleviate that maybe to stagger him more from those two and have him in these bench-heavy units. And I think you had just covered this on one of your pods. He and Bones Hyland want to play more together.
Right. I think so, and that's part of what's funny is Michael Porter, if you remember, Michael Porter joins the team. They're in the bubble playoffs, and I remember one post-game. I mean, Murray, Jokic, they just came back from 3-1 against the Jazz. They're against the Clippers, and Michael Porter said something about, like, yeah, we need the offense to have a little bit more me or something. He had some quote, and you're just kind of like, man, this guy's not afraid to, like, just say what he actually thinks.
I kind of respect.
Yeah. It's true, man. Like, this guy's just not afraid to kind of voice it. So the other day after the game, he said something we need to find more minutes for me and Bones. Bones obviously captains the bench. We need to find more minutes there because he understands the difficult shots I can take and make. And it's kind of a funny quote when you think of it word for word, but right. I actually agree with him. I do think that there is a Michael Porter that can fit better alongside Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic and to take a step back from maybe his peak to fit into the broader system, the greater the good. But I also think you can have him play with Bones in a second unit that needs a little bit more scoring and allow him to expand his role a little bit and be a number one isolation scorer type guy for half the game. So to me, I do think that's the best way. I don't know if we're going to arrive there, though, Dan. Michael Malone likes to play 5-man starters, 5-man bench lineups a lot. And it would be unique for him to stagger Michael Porter the amount that we're kind of talking about right now.
Is there like any wiggle room for him to get away from that with Michael Malone with this team, those really just super bench heavy lineups?
I wonder why he has this philosophy. I asked him about it one time and he denied it. like, oh, that's not true. And I'm like, well, if we look at the 5-man lineup, minute totals every year across the NBA, the Nuggets are always in the top 5. Like, you can have injuries. It doesn't matter. You're going to find some lineup that Michael Malone plays, heavy minutes. The answer, I just wouldn't expect it. Coaches have tendencies and certain things that you just know become part of their core. I wouldn't expect him to change things too much.
One thing I will say, if they are going to stagger, if he was willing to open it up, there might be a natural inclination to be, we need to see more Jokic with the bench or Jamal Murray with the bench. They played 80% of Jamal Murray's possessions together the season that he got injured. And when they play, they ascend to like a higher dimension. It's basketball nirvana. And just from an aesthetics perspective, I kind of want to separate those two as minimally as possible. And so I would just try to throw MPJ with the bench or heavy lineups.
I would even throw Aaron Gordon in this. I mean, Aaron Gordon and Jokic have developed a very nice chemistry, and they're kind of, Aaron Gordon does a lot defensively, and then he cuts, and he doesn't need touches and this or that. So to me, Murray, Jokic, Gordon, keep those guys together as much as possible. I think the other two spots to me are more interchangeable. KCP, Michael Porter, they're obviously great fits, but I think those are guys that you could put with that second unit, and you could bring in other guys, from the second unit, a Jeff Green, Bruce Brown, maybe Christian Brown. Those are guys I think you can plug into the first lineup and they fit with Jokic and Murray just as well. So to me, it's one of those funny things where we're early in the season and we can already see it looks like the solution to some of the obstacles for the Nuggets just require Michael Malone to do atypical things for him.
Nikola Jokic, to me, has reached a level of superstardom where I just don't have questions about him, but it's a Nuggets podcast, and how do you not ask specifically about Nikola Jokic? He makes there's just no spicy take anymore for me. I even was thinking he might be one of the most underrated crunch time guys in NBA history. And that just doesn't even feel hyperbolic anymore. But the national narrative, at least in some sectors of basketball intelligentsia, is you can't win a title with him as your central focus because of the defensive limitations. I think a lot of his limitations are misunderstood, but I do also think there's something to, can you surround him with enough guys who can help out behind or be aggressive in front of him? Do you one, buy into that concern? And two, with the additions of Braun, KCP, you have Gordon, even Davon Reed just sort of floating around here. Do you think that the Nuggets have done enough to surround him with the necessary defensive talent to be in that tier one of title contention?
I think this is a really interesting question, and one that there's a lot of different ways I can take this. I'll say this. I do buy into the concern. There's no question that for me, if you ask me, like, is a Jokic-led team good enough offensively to win a title? It's like, come on, of course it is. Like, it's one of the best almost any combination of players you put out there is one of the best combinations in the NBA at any given year. So no question. Is it, defensively? Well, we just have never seen it. So it's a fair question to ask. One thing I'll say to kind of preface this, I think most NBA analysts and most NBA fans make the game simultaneously more complex than it is and more simple than it is. More simple in this one way. Everybody thinks of, like, your big needs to be Clint Capella. Just block shots, rebound, roll to the rim. Who cares about skill set, this or that? And part of that is because there's tried and tested, like, that's the most common mold of center, just rim rolling, shot blocking big. And so it's easier to piece these puzzle pieces together. We've never seen a Jokic. So to envision a way for a Jokic to win requires a sense of creativity that we haven't seen. And I think people think, oh, well, we've never seen it, ergo it can't happen. To me, that's not a correct logical leap, even if I understand why they have those questions. I am curious. This is the best team that the Denver Nuggets have ever had in terms of on-ball containment, keeping people out of the paint. And Jokic is really good whenever you provide him that. When he's very good positionally, he reads the court well defensively, he communicates well. So can you just keep it so that guys aren't running downhill? I think Denver has enough talent to do that, but we haven't seen it because Jokic hurt his wrist in game number one. We just haven't seen it come to fruition at all. We haven't seen Jokic with this group of characters yet, even as a little sample.
Are we at all concerned about that wrist injury, by the way, or is it just very precautionary at this point?
I think it's precautionary. He was doing workouts before the game yesterday, and he was shooting without a brace and making them and doing some stuff. But nonetheless, Jokic has been an Iron Man. He hasn't really hurt himself. He did injure the wrist last year and just played through it. So maybe it's the same injury and maybe it's going to be the same result. Okay, maybe he shoots fewer threes this year or something, but we don't really talk about it at any point. But the fact of the matter is this team has not won games without Jokic in the last 7 years. I think you could count on one hand the total number of games they've won without Jokic in 7 seasons. So if he were to miss even just a 2-week period, especially with Murray and Porter coming back, it would be a pretty big deal. I think it's kind of a big deal that he's missing so much of camp because you wanted to get at least a few practice reps of all of these guys on the court together. There's 2 games left. Maybe we get him then. But so I would say I'm not panicked about it, but it definitely is a thing that could affect the season in a major way.
I will say I was more dismissive of the defensive concerns than you just were, like leading into before training camp, because you look at the minutes that Murray, MPJ, and Jokic played together in 2020, 2021, they were in like those lineups from the 70th percentile of defensive efficiency. And like, maybe that doesn't translate perfectly to the playoffs. There was some opponent shooting luck there, but they weren't fouling. They forced a good number of turnovers, which Jokic can be sneaky at doing himself. Right. So I was a believer, and I know that he is not factored into this, but do you have any concerns about what's happened defensively in the preseason? Like, what is going on there? Is there any symptom? Is it just a newness or an effort thing, or is there something more sinister at play here?
I think they were good defensively last night. Now they're missing their entire starting lineup, minus Michael Porter Jr. Michael Malone had a funny line pregame. He said, I feel like we've had all good days of camp minus 2, the 2 preseason games, meaning he feels like what they've seen in the games has not been reflective of what they've seen in camp. I'm not too concerned about it, to be honest. I think if I look at this team, coaches are always working on defense in the preseason. Defense wins championships. We got to build our defensive identity. I think that with Murray and Porter both coming back, it's probably natural that in Bones making a step up and this or that, I think most guys have just been focused on, like, I want to see if I can do this again offensively. Nobody wants to be like, I want to show the team I'm back by rotating on defense and doing this. So to me, I think that there's a level of, hey, I want to show everybody I've got it back. I'm going to hit the shots I used to hit. And then on top of that, we've seen like 15 real minutes of this team in the preseason. So I'm going to say it doesn't really matter. But again, if we get into 5 games of the season and it looks the way it did in the preseason, then 100% all bets are off.
I will say that makes me feel a little bit better. So that's consolation to me.
One step back from the ledge?
Yeah, maybe like a half step. So you mentioned Aaron Gordon, and he's always fascinated me because I feel like he's never been fully optimized on both ends of the floor. Orlando tested him for the Paul George gene on offense. It came back negative. He hasn't had the freedom to be the same type of play finisher that he should be in Denver, even though he's done a lot more of that. And then you look at the load he had to carry defensively last year. I just don't even think people gave that like enough attention. Is this specific roster, when you look at some of the defenders they added, and then now you have MPJ and Murray, hopefully, combining to play a bunch of games, is this like roster the best suited roster he's ever been on? Do you think that we're going to see the fully optimized version of Aaron Gordon? And my follow-up question to that is, I did see him. I watched a lot of the Chicago game, and he had spent more reps than I guess I thought, like on DeMar DeRozan. Is there are we going to see his defensive role change at all? The way maybe there might be some more roaming or aggression there from him.
I mean, I would hope so. DeMar DeRozan's a funny one. And again, I wish Denver would have been fully healthy for that game because I would have loved to have seen the different matchups that you would have rolled out there. Is that DeMar DeRozan is the type of guy that I think he is not good against. Ground bound but crafty guy. I think Aaron Gordon's good when he has to match up physical attributes on another player. I mean, he's guarded quick players well, brute force players. DeMar DeRozan's just so crafty. Aaron Gordon's good about, as athletic as he is, he's good about playing defense without jumping. And if you're a player like DeRozan and you know a guy's not going to jump to try to block your shot, then you just use your footwork to get around them and shoot the right shots. I like Aaron Gordon. I think he is a much better role player than people get. I think people look at him as a bad star. He's a great role player, and he's been asked even in Denver to go outside of his lanes a little bit. But if you look at the 2 seasons in Denver, they've been career years from offensive efficiency. And I expect that to go up even more this year. When I tell people he's going to have a career year, not in per game totals, I just think he's going to be hyper efficient and hyper impactful. He's smart. He knows his role. He seems to be very willing to play the 4th or 5th option on offense, which is not – he's good enough to be, let's say, a 3rd option on offense, but he's comfortable being the 5th option. So that's a rare thing. We always talk about guys that are a 1st option having to be a 2nd. Sometimes it's hard for a guy to go from 3rd to 5th, and he's so willing to do that and has the skill set to do it. So I expect big things from him. And then defensively, I think he's going to get matchups that are most favorable to him this year, whereas last year he just had to guard everyone, whether he was capable of guarding them or not.
What are you watching most closely for Bones Hyland in year 2? Someone who I'm drunk on Bones Hyland, but I know that you're high on him as well.
Yeah, it's tough. Coming into the season, you just wanted to see, could he continue to grow as a scorer and this or that? Watching the way the second unit plays out now, Bruce Bones, Davon Reed, Jeff Green, DeAndre Jordan, he's the best scorer and the best creator, and I think that's a tough combo. I would love for him, and I think the Nuggets are going to be best if he can be scorer first, playmaker second. And that probably means finding a little bit more spacing or a secondary ball handler. Maybe it's Ish Smith, who had a great game last night, to play alongside him. So now, if you asked me this a week ago, I had a different answer. Now it's, can he blend, not even blend, can he become the playmaker the second unit needs that Monte Morris was so good at being? Can he be that while also being a 15-point-per-game scorer, which to me is his best skill and the most value he could bring to the Nuggets? That's a really big ask for a second-year player. And if not, what can Denver do to allow him to be that attack scorer who goes off for 25, 30 points every now and then and completely flips games?
Yeah, I was impressed with him as a rookie with some of a lot of the live dribble passes that he made, but I do wonder if it's too heavy of a lift if you're going to run just all bench units and it's just him. And I didn't really think about it this way. If you did surround him with just 4 shooters and at least gave him the space to operate to where it's more reactive passes he would be making rather than instinctual or those complicated reads, I guess that would help him out.
I agree. And it's almost like a Jalen Brunson type or something, where if you spread things out, he's so quick, he's so dynamic, he could shoot, he can get to the rim, that, he would do that. But you don't have that great spacing. You have a second unit that needs a lot of help. They need someone to set the table for them a lot. So now he has to focus on that while also doing his best skill, which is score. And that's where I see it. being a tough ask. You're almost asking him to be Chris Paul with the second unit, which is not him. You want to ask him to be a little bit more of an attack guy who can play make at a very high level when his mind is on score and he just reads the court.
The Zeke Nnaji buzz has been loud coming out of Nuggets training camp. What is behind that, and why did it seemingly take so long for him to get, quote, heavy minutes in the preseason then?
This one I wish I could answer for you because it's weird. I've seen so many people talking about him. So I know, like, you know, the coaching staff, front office, they're pumping him up. You go to training camp, you know, you're talking to him, they're saying, hey, he's been looking good. He's been looking good. He's not playing a ton of minutes. Right now, he looks like he's the 11th guy in this rotation. And then you watch him in preseason, he's been good, but not great. It's not that he's been bad. It's just when you hear hype, you start to think, okay, this guy, can't wait to see what he's at. He looks like the same player. So I couldn't tell that. I couldn't tell you the answer to that. And then the worst part is, I think the toughest part is, I'm not sure where he fits into this rotation because he's clearly not a starter, right? Denver starters are solid. So you go to the second unit, your 3, 4, 5 are at the moment Davon Reed, Jeff Green, DeAndre Jordan. Well, he doesn't replace Davon Reed as a small forward, and I don't think he replaces Jeff Green or bumps Jeff Green to small forward since Jeff Green is, for the last 10 years, has been better at power forward than small forward. So you don't bump him to do that. And he's not necessarily a great center because he's not tall enough, doesn't jump high enough, doesn't rebound well enough, doesn't defend well enough.
The minutes with him at center, they got slaughtered on the glass. Sorry, I'm just saying the minutes with him at center last year, they got slaughtered on the glass. When I looked it up, I just couldn't. The numbers were worse than it even looked.
And that's the thing is, you know, he added this weight. He added it, you know, 3 or 4 inches to his vertical in the offseason. All this stuff was highly reported, and I just don't know if it makes the difference. So I think Zeke is one of those guys who I like his skill set, but I don't know where he slots into Denver. And that reflects in the minutes in the I know it's just preseason, but would I expect Zeke Nnaji to play on opening night if we went straight into opening night tomorrow? I would say probably not. And so I can't figure out why the hype is there, and then he's at this moment doesn't appear to be in the rotation.
Is his best path to being in the rotation either at the 4 or usurping DeAndre Jordan as the primary backup 5?
I'm guessing at the 5. And if we read between the lines here, Michael Malone has had very weird comments over the last 5-6 months. At the end of the season, he said, you know, Zeke Nnaji, we tried to make him a 5. He's a 4. Then come into this season, Zeke's a 5. And you're thinking, like, why are you changing the story on us? Probably because you're doing the same thing. Michael Malone's doing the same thing we are, which is trying to figure out where is he best going to fit. And yes, he's better as a 4, but his minutes are more available at the 5. But then he's not quite a 5. So I think he's in a tough spot. I worry about Zeke this year because I think he's a good player, and I just don't see the natural best path for both him and the Nuggets.
I wonder if that's like why the hype is so high, is the organization trying to build him up amidst all this ambiguity behind his role.
Yeah, I have no idea, man. It almost will get to the point where I'm going to start wondering, are they trying to trade him? Do they want everybody writing articles so that they can get a little bit more out of him?
You mentioned Davon Reed being in the rotation. Do you see him having a bigger role, or I guess a more regular role this year? And do you buy into his just the ability he showed last year against some of those like bigger like wing matchups defensively?
I don't know. I mean, he's another guy that I don't think should be penciled in for, you know, where does he fit exactly? I'm not exactly sure. He's a guy that his best thing he has going for him is the opposite of Zeke Nnaji. There's nobody in his spot. Backup small forward right now is an open, you know, there's an open position. I think he's battling Christian Braun, maybe Vlatko Cancar, guys that are just like him. You know, you wouldn't assume are going to take that spot. Davon's an interesting one. I don't know what he's great at. He can shoot the ball okay. He's got a great wingspan, so he has this upside as a defender, but I don't think he's a great defender. He's not a great like dribble drive creator or passer. So I'm not really sure. I think he's going to start the season in that spot, but I would be shocked if he finished the season in that spot. And I'd be shocked if the Nuggets counted on him as a top 10 playoff guy when it came time for that.
I always would have asked you for your impressions of Christian Braun and Peyton Watson, but I was reading Zach Lowe's tiers while I was doing, like, right before I did the outline for you, and he just slipped in Christian Braun is ready.
Yeah.
Can you give me, I know very little about either of these guys. Can you give me the lowdown here, please?
I don't think Christian Braun's ready. That would be my response to that line. He shot horribly in summer league, and the worst is it looked like he lost some confidence there. As a 3-and-D player, if you don't have the 3 part, you know, you're just a defensive player, obviously. And then in the preseason, I would say the same thing. Now, last night he bounced back a little bit. I think he went 3 of 5, 1 of 1 from the 3-point line. I think he's a really fundamentally sound player, but he's got to have that shot going for him to break into the rotation. I'll say this. If you ask me who at the end of the year is in the rotation, Davon Reed or him, I would bet on him. And if you ask me at the end of the year who was in the rotation, Christian Braun or Zeke Nnaji, I think I would take Christian Braun. And a large part of that is because I just think there's a vacancy. There's this position of need there. Whereas with Zeke Nnaji, it's a little bit less urgent.
Wow. All right. So, I mean, that's close to Christian Braun being ready.
Well, he's not ready. They just need him to be ready.
Is there an underrated strength about this team that's not being discussed enough?
They're really long. I think that's probably one thing. If you look at Jamal Murray and KCP, both guys 6'5" with good wingspans, good strength. That's pretty good for a backcourt. And then you go Michael Porter, 6'11", Aaron Gordon, 6'9", but big and long, and then Jokic 7 feet. So to me, that would be it, is that starting lineup is probably a top 7 or 8 longest starting lineup, and functionally long. They're not just like long and awkward. They're long and mobile and versatile and can switch. So I think that's one thing that the Nuggets haven't actually had in the Jokic era. And I think it's a thing that will stick out the more they play together. How do you, for example, you try to switch just an off-ball screen with, KCP and Aaron Gordon, a 2-4 exchange on the weak side happens all the time. If you try to switch that, Aaron Gordon has a shooting guard on him. That's a rebounding mismatch. That's a post-up mismatch.
Yeah.
So I just think there's a lot of that. Same goes for Michael Porter. You have a small forward you like, but he's only 6'5", where you're starting 5-6 inches too short on a great 3-point shooter. So I think Denver's just going to look really tall a lot this season.
Do you have any sense of how well Bruce Brown will fit in? I think KCP is more just a given, and Bruce Brown, just because his offense is idiopathic and so unique, do you see him like being any issues early on to try and figure that fit out?
I do. And I think he fits great with the starting unit. And I don't think he fits as great with the second unit. And that's part of my concern. We talked earlier about staggers. If you just look at that second unit, he's the second guard alongside Bones. Well, is he an on-ball creator that you can run at point? I don't think so. I think he's a good connector. I think he's a guy that can keep a continuity offense going. But if you're asking him to like initiate the offense, I think teams will start pressuring him, and I think that those possessions won't go well. So that would be my concern. But I love Bruce Brown. And when you start to think about what works in the regular season versus the postseason, Bruce Brown, to me, is a guy that unlocks a lot of Denver's potential in the postseason.
Hopefully Michael Malone is willing to experiment with some lineups there then, though, if you need him to stagger and play more with the starters.
You would hope. I mean, Michael Malone might just give it 10 games and then start to experiment. I mean, we'll see. But Bruce Brown, to me, is a guy that of all the guys, Bruce Brown is a Michael Malone guy. So I suspect that he's going to get a lot of minutes and a lot of opportunity.
Look, he'll be dynamite if he ends up shooting on wide open threes, what he did last year. Even if the volume remains the same, it's not super high. That ends up being just like an absolute dynamite pickup for them. Yeah. We've talked about some of the concerns already, but are there any other concerns about this roster team that aren't getting enough attention heading into the regular season?
I really think the whole season comes down to two things. One, can they defend, which, everybody kind of knows that. And then the other thing is just the integration of Michael Porter. I think everybody looks at this talent and skill set and just adds that on top of what you get already from a Jokic team. But it's more complex than that. Can he find a role that he likes and that fits into me? It's just going to be a fascinating and complex story that will require a lot of nuance to tell, to be honest with you. And it's one of those things that I think there will be a lot of perspectives on Denver this year that I think missed the mark, because you'll be painting with broad strokes when this is really a chemistry amongst personalities and skill set story.
When I was looking at this team's 10-man rotation, it feels like there are 8 locks in Murray, KCP, MPJ, Gordon, Jokic, Hyland, Braun, and Jeff Green. Would you agree with those locks? And how do you see the final 2 spots being fleshed out for, let's say, most of the season? I know you said you could see Christian Braun kind of being in there by the end, but I guess for most of the season.
I think DeAndre Jordan plays opening night and plays a lot of minutes. And I think that's one of the big surprises. Davon, I think that other spot is going to come down to a lot of like tinkering, and some of this will be handled by injuries. But Ish Smith has had a very good preseason and a very good camp. Did they try to play him? We talked about Bones not being the primary ball handler, or focus more on scoring. Is the solution that Ish Smith just plays? He's just your backup point guard, and Bones Hyland's your backup shooting guard that plays a lot of pick and roll. I kind of think that might be the solution. Then Bruce Brown slides to 3, and then you have Jeff Green. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was it. And then lastly, I wouldn't be surprised if Denver was an aggressive trade line team or trade deadline team where they look at this and they say, okay, we have 8 guys, but we need to try to find this or this, and we'll have to depart with one of our top 8, and we'll have to depart with guys like a Zeke Nnaji and maybe even a Christian Braun or something like that in order to shore up an immediate need at small forward or center or whatever.
Yeah, it'd be weird to try and pump up Zeke Nnaji's stock and then not play him to try and then trade him would be a little bit counterintuitive. And I was actually going to ask that if you thought this organization was willing to sort of shift on a whim again, even if it's a slow start, do you at least see the coaching staff being open to like manipulating with some of the lineup combinations? Then if they start off like, I don't know, like 3 and like, I mean, even 3 and 5 or 3 and 6 would be like a pretty 5-alarm fire for a team that's supposed to be this good.
I mean, there's no question. Denver can't afford to fall too far behind out west. Too much uncertainty with health, so you don't want to fall behind. I do expect Michael Malone would be willing to make big changes like that. And I think the organization, you kind of hinted at this, Calvin Booth, I think the whole organization knows it's go time. So if they feel like something's not working, I think they'll make moves. But the thing is the big question mark for me is Michael Porter. And he's not really a guy you can move on for. Not a guy I think they want to, but he's also a guy you can't. So for me, it's more the tinkering will probably be more about him and where does he fit and how do you play when he's on the court and how do you try to find shots for him than anything. But, as far as lineup combinations, it would be more of that, the stagger. I don't see anybody entering the starting lineup. The 5, I think I would be shocked if that wasn't the starting lineup by the end of the year.
This is to some extent matchup dependent, but what do you think should be their go-to closing unit? Is it just the starting 5, or do you see the potential for futzing and fiddling there?
Lots of potential, and it's part of why I'm high on the team. And again, talking about why we were high, not the obstacles to get there, but why we're high on the team. If you need a defensive lineup and it's not working with Michael Porter, as I suspect is a very good chance, I think you just put Bruce Brown in there, and you have the best defensive lineup of the Jokic era by a mile. Jamal Murray, Bruce Brown, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Aaron Gordon, and Jokic. That's a very switchable, I think, very smart lineup that has still the proper amount of spacing, playmaking, high IQ, all of those types of things. If you want a little bit more offense in a closing lineup, say you're down 8 in the final 5 minutes and it's, defense isn't quite the priority, you need to make up points. Maybe you put Bones Hyland alongside Jamal Murray and Michael Porter and Aaron Gordon, and that lineup should score every time down court, really put pressure on other teams to keep pace. And then you have Jeff Green, who, by the way, is a sneaky great Jokic player. He had a career year last year at 34 years old in dunks. Jokic loves tall guys that are good at attacking mismatches. I mentioned earlier Aaron Gordon, how they're a tall team you don't want to switch on. Jeff Green can be added to that mix in some configuration. Maybe it's not with Michael Porter, maybe it's not with Aaron Gordon, but you put him out there, and he's just another guy that – are you going to switch Devin Booker onto Jeff Green? Jeff Green's too big. He's really good at using that extra 4 inches and 40 pounds. He's very good at using that to his advantage, and Denver can just throw a lot of different combinations out to close games that, in my opinion, solve every offensive problem that you could throw at them. And then they have some defensive lineups that, at least in theory, give them the best chance at being a good defensive group in the clutch.
Is there any weirdo, bonkers, quirky, or just off the beaten path lineup you're hoping that Michael Malone might roll out this season?
The one I just told you is the most fun. Murray, Bones, Porter, Gordon, Jokic. It's just because it's like a fun line. Like I always, when you think about regular season, you just think of what would happen if you put your best offensive lineup on the court. Forget defense. Could you win a quarter? Could you win a 5-minute stretch, 30-15, just because you scored every time down the court? I think that's one that you probably could. I mean, Bones, Murray, is there a better 5-man lineup you could put out in the NBA this year? I bet we could sit and think about one, maybe one or two, but Bones, Murray, KCP, MPJ, Jokic, you're talking about 4 40% three-point shooters, 2 elite pick-and-roll players, and, then obviously Jokic. To me, that's like a lineup that they're not going to guard anyone, but my God, would they score every time down court, 2 or 3 points every single time down.
Yeah, I can't even think of a team that could field a more potent one off the top of my head. Like just to even try and brainstorm it quickly, I would love to see that lineup. And even if you need to throw Aaron Gordon in for KCP because you think you're getting a defensive upgrade there, I would love to see that lineup. I really kind of want to see more Michael Porter Jr. with the bench just to see how it goes, where it's Michael Porter Jr., Bones, Bruce Brown, and then I would prefer to see Nnaji in there just for the shooting as well, and then maybe even Jeff Green. I don't know if you're too small, what the rebounding looks like there. Yeah,
why not try it?
Yeah, why not? Why not just throw it out there and see what happens? As we record this, their win total over under has moved up to 50.5. I think it was at like 49.5 initially. Would you smash the over, the under on that? And where do you see them stacking up in the regular season relative to the rest of the West?
I think they're going to be good in the regular season. I mean, if you have Jokic, you're just winning a lot of games. They have a lot of different ways to beat you. If Michael Porter has to sit out a night, if Jamal Murray has to sit out a night, I still think they're going to win at like a 46, 47 win clip. I mean, they just have that much talent. So to me, I think they're built to survive the regular season, and then they're going to have to adjust. And they have those 7 or 8 guys that I really trust to play in the playoffs, and they'll have to maybe adjust a little bit that way. But 50.5, I'm taking the over. The Nuggets, by the way, have been over, I think, in 6 of the 7 years of the Jokic era. So
holy shit, I did not know that.
Sometimes and I think the year they weren't was the bubble year, and I think they went 0-8 in those regular season games that ramped up, and that was the only reason they went under is because they lost all 8 of those tune-ups. So I think that the Nuggets, I feel weird always taking them to go over, but it's always right. So I think I'm not saying they're going to win, 58 games or anything like that, but 50.5, I think 51 is more likely than not.
I did my record projections, this YouTube like short off the cup record projections, because I was smashing every single over during these look ahead podcasts, and I've done 20 plus of them now. So I had the Nuggets ending up with the best record in the NBA. So clearly I'm smashing the over on that. I am curious. I would see them I think their regular season floor is just so high. Are there any particular team matchups when you look at the postseason that with this roster as currently constructed would concern you? And the thing just that I would add to the over-under, last year's team with Jokic won 48 games. And so I keep going back well, how much will Murray and MPJ play? What would they look like to start? And it's just it amounts to an upgrade overall over the supporting cast that you had last year. How would they not clear 50?
No question about it. The matchups, Golden State, I think Golden State and Phoenix are the 2 teams. I mean, you're talking about how do you beat Jokic and Jokic teams in the playoffs? You just put them in pick and roll over and over and over and over again. And then you hope to have enough defense, unlike a Portland team who also did that, but they couldn't guard anyone. Mm-hmm. If you have just a little bit of defense and then an elite pick and roll offense, then you can kill them. And that's what those 2 teams did. The other teams that are maybe capable of that, maybe you could say a Dallas, but I think Denver is more equipped to handle a guy like Luka than a guy like Steph or a guy like.
I'm out on Dallas this season if you care in any way, so I wouldn't concern myself with them.
I'll go ahead and say that Phoenix and Golden State to me are the 2 teams that I think make the toughest challenge for Denver.
Where do you land on the Clippers with that? Is it just the Nuggets could kind of brutalize them with so much size and length that it really wouldn't be that bad of a matchup, even if they decide to roll super small?
People laugh. I mean, I know you're a guy that's on this with Jokic is not a bad defender. He's just really bad at one thing. If you don't run that one thing, if your thing is not spreading you out, running pick and roll and pulling up from mid-range and threes, if you do anything else, Jokic is a good defender, and in some cases, very good defender. So if you're trying to attack Jokic with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, go for it. Jokic's going to be able to play position defense, keep you out of there, protect the glass. And then as we saw, and as we've seen every single year for the last 4 or 5 years, Jokic is not afraid of Ivica Zubac. That's an easy matchup for him. He likes that matchup. So if that's your plan to stop Jokic, Denver's going to score at a high clip. And I just think that Denver's defensive deficiencies are muted a little bit by the way that the Clippers attack. They're a good team. I don't want you to think I think Denver rolls over them. I'm just saying they don't have the stylistic advantage over Denver like Golden State does.
I also think what might benefit the Nuggets in the regular season specifically is the top of the West, especially following whatever's going on with Draymond Green in the Warriors locker room now. The Nuggets have their own injury concerns, but there's a lot of teams are just combustible, where it's what if things don't work out with Gobert and Cat in Minnesota? The Lakers are fucking wild. You have the Clippers with their own injuries, and they don't really have a center aside from Zubac unless you're super high on Moses Brown. And so even Nuggets, again, you have MPJ and Murray coming back, but because Jokic is this stabilizing superstar that's always available, it adds to, even the vibes coming out of Phoenix have been weird. I would phrase it that way. So I think that ends up helping the Nuggets, maybe not so much in the postseason, but certainly when it comes to eating up innings and wins during the regular season.
Yeah. I think you might be right about that. I think I'm with you.
So my final question is there anything that I did not ask you about that you think needs to be discussed with regard to this team?
No, not really. I mean, they're interesting. The disaster potential is interesting. If it doesn't work out for Denver this year, what kind of big sweeping moves do you end up making? That would be an interesting one. Michael Malone, I think, finds himself on a hot seat this year. He's preached defense for 7 years to various levels of his success. He's talked about needing better defensive players. If you get handed all of these defensive talents and all of these good offensive talents and your team underperforms, I think that this is a year that things segue for him and maybe the pressure gets added. So I don't expect that to happen, but it's just one of those things where Malone is in a precarious spot that he has not been in the last few years, where now it's kind of like, hey, are you the guy to get us to this final step or not? And we'll see what happens.
That's also, this is a cliche, is just the easiest thing for them to change at this point, especially because I think you could say, well, what if they move Michael Porter Jr.? But if he's playing well enough to be this high-value trade asset, you probably don't want to move Michael Porter Jr. And if he's not...
I disagree with that. If it's working out, but not to the level where you're confident that is the combination, but if it's working out well enough for you to trade, even for $1 for 2.50-cent pieces, I think Denver would do it. In part because I just think Denver's offense is good enough. Without Michael Porter, I think Denver's offense is good enough to win a championship. With him, they become unassailable. But the question is, can you win defensively with him? And we just don't know that. So if he's playing well enough that a lesser team, maybe like an Atlanta Hawks team, says, hey, we want that superstar talent over here, we'll give you some of our perimeter defense, then a team like Denver, I think, would have to take it.
I wonder if a Toronto would be willing, if he's playing well, would be willing to roll the dice on him.
OG Anunoby?
Yeah, OG Anunoby's there. They have Gary Trent Jr. too in his contract here, would be a good fit as well.
Both of those guys to me are great fits. I mean, Michael Porter is like a more exciting talent, right? He's more of a superstar. So we always just say, if you're a superstar, you're better than a role player. Not always true. Sometimes great role players are better than bad superstars or bad fit superstars.
Yeah.
Michael Porter, we're not sure if he's one of those two yet. He might be a great fit, great superstar, but at the moment, we're not sure. We know OG Anunoby's a great role player, and I think that Gary Trent Jr. is a sneaky good role player, especially for what Denver needs. So to me, those things aren't crazy.
Adam, this was spectacular. Thank you so much for your time. The final thing I'll ask of you, because I know you're feeling under the weather, is in case anyone skipped the intro, can you tell everyone where they can find you and all the great work that you do?
DNVR, our YouTube page is the best entry point if you're ever wondering. We do a post-game show for every single Nuggets game. We do live podcasts on there. And then we have some cool videos. I do some X's and O's breakdowns as well on the Denver Nuggets. So DNVR's YouTube page.
I'm also excited to check out that documentary trailer that you guys just dropped before we recorded this, apparently. Yeah, so I'm excited for that. Thank you so much, Adam. And as you know, I will be pestering you again in the future.
Can't wait.